part on this, part moderator, I think. So I am going to introduce
You're in control.
Yes, I'm in control, sort of, at least right now. So I think we're going to start with some introductions and go from there with some discussion between us, and then save time for questions at the end. So I'll hand it over to the main act, Amy.
And I'm gonna introduce MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and my company, which is a subsidiary of it. And I'm gonna actually put myself on a timer because there's so much that can be said, and I don't wanna take up the whole time doing that. So I'm gonna give myself a time limit here.
I can do that for you too.
Okay. So first, I'm just gonna start with a little background on like what are we working on. So it's a compound called MDMA. If you're familiar with MDMA, some of you might know it as ecstasy, and if you're a little younger, probably Molly, and maybe there's even new words for it that I don't even know. So, so MDMA was first developed in 1912 by Merck, so by the pharma industry, right? And then it was kind of largely forgotten about. They kind of shelved it and didn't do much with it. And then in 1976, Alexander Shulgin, or lovingly called Sasha Shulgin, he resynthesized this. And there was hundreds, thousands probably, of therapists that were introduced to it and started using it in therapy. It was fantastic, they found, for couples therapy, and also found it was really amazing for working with trauma. But what happened from there was it kind of leaked into the nightlife scene, and it became recreational. A really cool documentary on the Stork Club in Dallas, where a lot of this started. You might see J.R. Ewing, for those of you that remember the show Dallas, as part of that. He became one of our supporters for our nonprofit before he passed away. So because it kind of escaped from being therapeutic into recreational, it was then scheduled in 1986. So it went from developed by pharma industry, used in therapy, and then found by the masses, and then it was scheduled, which means it had no medical use. That was the ruling, no medical use, right? So it's got an interesting little history already. So as soon as that happened, the founder of MAPS, the nonprofit, Rick Doblin, was like, I'm gonna take this back through the regulatory and medical system. Like, that does have a medical use. So he fought this in court. There's some really interesting stories there. And then it took a long time from when it was scheduled until when MAPS, the nonprofit, had enough money and was able to pull together enough people to start to do research on it again. So I met Rick in 2003. And I heard that he wanted to start a nonprofit pharma company. I had a lot of interest in psychedelics. My own personal experiences told me that these were valuable compounds that should be tools, and I had a research background. I worked in the vaccines industry because it seems like I must like controversial things. I don't know which one is more controversial, psychedelics or vaccines. So I met him, and I had this aha moment listening to him talk about bringing this back through the system. I was like, I have to help him do this. So I spent about 6 years of my time, personal time, while I still worked in vaccines, to help get some initial studies started. So that was kind of the beginning. We did all of it through philanthropy, raising $150 million through philanthropy to do phase 2 studies. So to get something through a regulatory system, you got to do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We skipped phase 1 because the government did a lot of that research for us, trying to prove that this was a dangerous compound, which they did not really do. So we used all of that in order to start in phase 2. And that meant we started MDMA for post-traumatic stress studies. And so once we had more data and a little more resources, we decided to take my research team out of the nonprofit and put it into a for-profit. But we decided it should be a public benefit corporation, meaning that we take into account our stakeholders that are more than financial stakeholders. So I've been the leader of that group since. So that's how there's MAPS and MAPS Public Benefit Corporation. And it's confusing because we just gave ourselves the same names and an acronym within an acronym. So probably not the best branding. You guys could probably help me with that. So that's a little bit of the history. So we work with people with PTSD. There's 13 million people in the US with PTSD, and it's not all vets. More women than men have PTSD. It's more from violence and sexual trauma than anything. But the vets are also a really important voice for us. So they help us to get this out there, and they're the ones that also help us to make this very bipartisan. But if you're, we'll get into this more later. But there's just so much more, and it is bipartisan because trauma can happen to anybody. And so there's such a huge need. So this is the group that we work with. We've really shown over those phase 2 studies and then into our phase 3 studies, which is the last step that's needed to get something approved by the FDA, that we can have a big impact. So right now, there hasn't been a lot of innovation in psychiatry. So in the last 20 years, nothing has happened. So we still have the same old SSRIs, and this really just creates symptom management for people. That's really just kind of controlling depression. But people with PTSD have a ton of symptoms. And what we've shown in our phase 3 studies, working with people that had chronic treatment-resistant PTSD, is that 88% of the people in our study had a clinically significant reduction in their symptoms, and 67% of them no longer had PTSD at the end. This was people so in phase 2, people had PTSD for 19 years on average, 14 years in the first phase 3, 16 years in the second. So they were treated as somebody with a chronic treatment-resistant indication that really was just going to have symptom management. This happens in 3 doses of MDMA. So MDMA plus therapy. Now, this is also something really innovative because right now there isn't anything that's come through the US regulatory system that's a prescription that includes therapy. So this is like a hurdle for us. So we're trying to bring the first psychedelic through. Not only that, but it's psychedelic plus therapy. So we have and we're working in mental health, right? And so there's a lot of stigma to get through as we do this work. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you in background here? I think something important to know is how close we're getting. We have all of our phase 3 done. We're filing with FDA this year for a new drug application. Takes FDA 8, 10, 12 months, depends, for an approval, but we should have this approved as a new indication so that people can actually go and get treatment in the beginning of 2024. I've been working on this for 20 years, so this is really incredible that we're here. So now how do we do it, right? We're moving out of psychedelic, kind of mission-driven psychedelics back into this healthcare system we were rejected from, trying to go back into it. We've had a group of amazing mission-driven people that have gotten us here. And I think there's a lot we have to do now to get back into this kind of traditional and broken system. And there's compromises to be made and kind of branding to be done, and it's tricky. It's tricky to do these next steps, and I'm sure there's other people in the audience, like as you're trying to bring something forward, that are probably dealing with some of these same things. So I was 30 seconds over.
Nice work. So the next most important person on the panel is Donna. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Donna Carpenter. My late husband, Jake, started Burton Snowboards in 1977. I met him in 1981 when he said all the hard work had been done already.
CFO at 22 years old?
Yeah, running Europe at the age of 22. And it was really kind of by accident. Jake initially conceived of snowboarding as something that you did on the back hills in lieu of going to a ski resort. It was a piece of wood with a rope on the end and some straps. And at some point in the kind of early 80s, he said, what if we steal skiing's technology? What if we look at making, fiberglass wood core boards with edges and bindings? And the only place that really was done was in Europe. And I actually had another job lined up in Austria where he finally found a factory that agreed. That was a story in itself, getting a factory to agree to make these things. atomic? We asked. They said no. So I had another job lined up, and before we left, he said, we're getting some inquiries from Europe. Do you think you could take a look? And the next thing I knew, at the age of 22, I was setting up an office in Europe and getting distribution across Europe. So Europe's always been one of my passions and responsibilities in the company. At some point when we came back, we needed a chief financial officer. And because I had run Europe for so many years, I did that, eventually taking over all of our international business. And then eventually, with Jake's cheerleading, becoming president and CEO of the company. And one of the things that I did, made it my mission, was to pivot the company. We had always been very product driven, right? Product sort of drove our company, and the technological changes sort of drove the advances. And for the last 10 years, I've really been pivoting us from being a product driven company to being a purpose driven company. And what does that mean? That means taking care of our sport. We've done more for the sport of snowboarding than any company out there. Whether it's the support of the athletes or working with the resorts, even getting resorts to allow it, and now, teaching, all of that, taking care of our people, right? And then taking care of our planet. So, I think one of the best things I ever did was work with this woman who actually took that vision and made it happen. But I think, one of the things that reminds me, when you're talking about MAPS and what's going on there is, we were pioneering a new sport, but we were plugging into an existing industry, right? There were ski resorts, there were trade shows, there were ski shops. They wanted nothing to do with us. The greatest innovation in skiing was rejected by the ski industry. I remember the first trade show we went to. We had a friend who made tooling equipment, and so we were sharing his booth. I think it was half kosher, not totally kosher, but we were there. And the trade show, the Ski Industry of America, they actually sent these big union guys to physically remove us from the trade show. And I remember Jake having this tug of war with this board. We're staying. No, you're going. We're staying. We stayed. And so it really kind of reminds me that when people always say they love innovation until they realize it means change. Yeah. It means actual change. So that's something. And the other interesting thing, I think there's a parallel to, Amy, we've talked about, is because we were excluded from the ski industry, we developed as a very tight community. It didn't matter. And you can still see it today. When you watch the Olympics, I always have friends who never watch snowboarding except every 4 years at the Olympics, and they're like, they seem to be rooting for each other. The competitors, they seem so happy when their friend wins and they get second place or whatever. And it's true. We've got that spirit of being a true community because we were excluded. So we kind of became this tribe, us against the world, kind of. So we developed a very strong community that helped propel us forward.
Yeah.
Are we introducing Ali?
Yeah.
Like I said, she's the one who's done all the hard work.
So I'll make this quick so we can move into the depth of the session. My name's Ali Kenney. I'm our Chief Strategy Officer at Burton. And I talked my way into the company by pretending I knew how to use Excel. I thought that just meant putting numbers in cells, but it was more to that. And anyway, my pivotal career moment was when I did pitch to Donna. She said she had an open door policy, and I took that and ran with it and scheduled time with her and pitched what we needed to do about environmental social impact, why we needed to do it, and what we should do. And at the end, she said, "Are you saying that you want to do that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And
She was a manager at the time, not even a director.
And she wanted to hire the VP of legal instead, and came back to me and said, "Would you report to him?" And I was like, I cried, I was mad. And then I scheduled time with her that happened to only be on a Saturday at 2. I had an MBA class. I rushed to the mountain after my MBA class, and I had my resume in my pocket, and we took a run and we had coffee, and I told her all the reasons why I should get the role versus someone else that mainly had a title, and I had government experience, international experience, product experience, all these things that I walked through. I was scared out of my mind. Anyway, she deputized me, as the New York Times said last week in their article, and that was that. So we had to figure out what that meant for us and what we were going to do, and we're going to get into that later. And then I've basically become a serial, I think, solutions provider addict. So I find things that we need to change and propose what we need to do about it. And
I block for her.
Yeah, she's my tackler. So yeah, now we have a whole strategy team under me that's brand new, consumer insights research team, and then a major group of purpose and impact work. So environmental, social impact, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, philanthropy, snowboarding advocacy, and the most incredible leader who's sitting right here now running the purpose and impact work. Ashley Laporte, she will be replacing me on stage within a year on all of these topics for sure. So anyway, that's how I got here, and I think there's a lot of connections between both Burton's history, as Donna has mentioned, and then just figuring out how to be more than just a traditional company in an industry like a pharma industry or whatever, and how to really drive impact and change through the way you run your business. So let's get into it.
I think one of the things we all have in common is not taking no for an answer.
Yeah, true. Okay, so I think the first thing we were going to...
Actually, we love to be told no, because it just, you know what I mean?
You know you're in the right spot.
Watch me. Yeah, it's motivating.
We actually had a poster in college, I was an ice hockey player, and there weren't women's ice hockey players, but it was a picture of a female ice hockey player, and it said, don't tell me what I can't do, because we were trying to break through and actually create an industry for women in hockey. So I think that's a commonality between us here. So building a brand, both creating an industry, but also plugging into an existing industry. So that's a commonality here. I think maybe share, Amy, some context on MAPS and how that's proceeding for you.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's evolved over time, right? First, it started as this nonprofit with kind of this message of healing, harm reduction, advocacy, changing drug laws, and research, right? And so that's still that nonprofit. And then when we took the research team and made it into this public benefit corporation, that was, that really is a piece of the puzzle, the part that I work on. All of this is important, and I sit under that doing this one piece, which is legalization through a medical system. And getting this back into the medical system where it started and was rejected from. And the brand is, having to go through a lot of change right now because it was initially rejected. It took a lot of people that were really mission driven and kind of centered around the psychedelic world, right? So all of our nonprofit, all the funding that came in, it was usually because somebody had their psychedelic experience. Somehow it was meaningful to them. So they donated to this. They had someone, there's someone in their family, someone that was healed. A lot of it might have been even through unfair drug laws, right? So all of these things band people together to help create this movement. But now we need to move beyond that. So now we need to move beyond just our psychedelic stakeholders into, we really are, I'm kind of trying to like reclaim this word. We're a pharma company, and it feels so weird to say it. We're like in biopharma, and we're trying to do this, but we're doing it as a public benefit corporation, which is a little different. Like if you really think about it, all pharma should be public benefit corporations, but they're not, right? And so this is where, and so we have to go from kind of these outsiders back into something that's a really traditional system. And it's also a broken system, this medical system. And we have to do it without losing this mission alignment and these stakeholders that have gotten us to this point. And so that's how we're thinking about trying to build this brand into that. And I think there's just so many actually parallels to what I'm trying to do. And what you have done as you've worked and to build the snowboarding industry. So I don't know, I feel like there's a lot that at first when we started to talk, I was like, it feels like there's an automatic kind of alignment between the psychedelic world and snowboarding somehow, but there's been so much more than I ever expected as we've started to talk. So maybe sharing some of how you navigate this, because I'm about to probably piss off some stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you start with a core community that is so passionate, right? Mm-hmm. And they're kind of watching your every move. I'm going to tell you, invariably, you're going to piss them off at some point about something. But I think Burton's done a good job of navigating that for one primary reason. And it happened kind of in the late 80s and early 90s, I guess, late 80s, early 90s. And, basically, Jake, I was handling finance, sales, operation. Jake was doing product and marketing, and basically he's designing every snowboard. And we kind of missed a trend. We missed the freestyle trend. And so we took on the world's best freestyle rider, a guy named Craig Kelly. And if you go to our headquarters, you'll see that our R&D facility is named after him. He was trained as an engineer, and he was an incredible rider, kind of took the sport to a new level. And when he started riding for us, he said, listen, I'm going to ride for you, but you got to listen to me. You got to listen to the guys who are out there, the guys and the women who are out there riding 150 days a year or whatever. And it was at that moment that our complete mindset switched and we became rider driven. We were going to listen to the rider. What we thought was right was, almost irrelevant if they didn't think it was right. So I think that that's what's helped us. You make mistakes, but when you're a pioneer, first of all, people tend to forgive you quicker because you are pioneering it. And secondly, we became so committed to just listening to what our rider wanted and needed.
Yeah.
And I mean, you feel that way, right? I mean, about listening to the patients versus...
Yeah, for sure. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything else.
No, I was
going to. Yeah, I think that, that's what we're trying to make sure we don't lose that. When you're small, it's easy to listen to your stakeholders in a way. And, a lot of that has been the initial patients that have enrolled in our studies and been treated, and they've become huge advocates for us. And then also our therapists, like they're so dedicated to making this happen and to making sure there's another tool out there for people. And how do we, as we get bigger and we're trying to expand into a medical system that doesn't prioritize healthcare and doesn't mental health care and doesn't really prioritize it for the people that need it the most, like how do we move through this system listening to the patient? And for us, that means listening to the patient that's the demographics that are the most affected. So for PTSD, like I said, a lot of people think of vets almost immediately, right? But if you're a woman, if you're BIPOC, if you're LGBTQIA+, you are twice as likely to have PTSD. And you're more unlikely to actually have mental health care treatment. That's available to you. Now, and also because we're working with trauma, it's really important for people that are going to have their trauma treated to work with someone that has a similar lived experience to them, that understands them and isn't going to re-traumatize them. So we've had to do a lot of work in our clinical studies to really make sure our demographics in the studies matched the PTSD population. That's kind of unseen, right? And so this is how we're going to try to stay true to this as we move forward. So our, listening to our stakeholders is listening to our patients and listening to our therapists. And while also working in a system that we acknowledge is broken, and also trying to work in some really traditional ways to get this reimbursed. One of the amazing things that's happened for us recently is that we were able to get, if you work in healthcare at all, you have to have codes, right, to charge something and to get it reimbursed. And we were actually just able to get a code because these sessions last all day. Like there's 3 times, but it's all day, and there's not really a way to do this, to bill for it. So we were able just recently to get American Medical Association to grant a code. It'll go into effect next year that allows to charge for an all-day session. Right? So this is like a huge first step. And how do we keep doing this? We're going to have a lot of pressure. We're also starting to take more traditional money in because it's really expensive to do this. And I think money coming in or the need for money is one of those things that starts to pressure you. So working in a system, broken system, and needing money, like these things all start to pressure us to make decisions that don't prioritize that voice.
But I think if you stay true to that, you'll be able to block out some of the distractions. You'll make it clear to your investors, what your North Star is. I mean, I remember the first time Jake got sick and I had to run the company on my own. I could just hear his voice saying to me, in terms of making a decision, is it right for the rider? Is it something the rider needs or wants? If it's not, let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think, part of, so your challenge is you're commercializing and you're going to piss off a lot of that OG original community. And I think we've done a really good job by staying rider driven, of staying close to our community. But I think we're in a transition phase too as a company where we've been transitioning to more of a purpose driven company. And we talk a lot about committing to people, committing to planet and sport. And we are getting a lot of people that are like, why don't we just go back to the rider? Why are you talking about people and planet also? And I think there's also this, as Donna mentioned early on, we developed this tribe, which I think you somewhat have in the psychedelic space. And we're realizing that tribal is maybe not such a good thing after all. And this fuck you attitude, you're either in or you're out. And so we're actually in this really kind of powerful evolution of how we're thinking about that and thinking about actually how do we become a community that is inclusive and creates this culture of belonging in a way that's very unique. And I'll be talking about this in a company meeting sometime. And once in a while we use this, what the hell is it called? Slido, where you can anonymous comment. Mm-hmm. And people will be like, well, why don't we just go back to 1980 when it was just about the rider? Why people and planet? And I'm like, really? Come on. So, I think
it's not a lot.
It's not a lot. It's trolls, which we all have the trolls.
For us, it's moving beyond now the psychedelic community into mental health because right. I actually need the traditional pharma people that know how to do these next steps to come into the company, and I need to mesh these worlds, and I need to make it about mental health because some people are coming in that are not part of the psychedelic community, and there is a bigger message that we're out that we need to embrace.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the transitions we're in too, is we've been working on a brand positioning that it's somewhat of an evolution, a rebranding of Burton, because we've always been associated to Burton is, the biggest snowboarding company, and, realizing that we want to grow beyond just the activity of snowboarding in ways that we can connect with people if they're not a snowboarder, for example, in that kind of inclusivity lens. And so we've been doing all of this work, and I think it actually really closely mirrors my my experience with psychedelics, of this idea of bringing to life the feeling of riding and finding an emotional connection and an insight around snowboarding. Is this, it's a spiritual, it can be a spiritual experience of, we're also weighted down by all of the responsibilities and craziness of modern life, and it's this way that you're fully connected to all of your senses in the moment, and it's weightless. So a turn, you experience a moment of weightlessness and this oneness connection. And I think for me, my experience with psychedelics is similar, of like loss of ego and this feeling of connection with the environment and people in a way that is really hard to unlock sometimes. And so we're working through this rebranding kind of brand positioning evolution to say, like, you don't have to be a snowboarder if you, like, we are going to bring this experience to life, and this experience of weightlessness and this evolution here, and that enables people to connect with our brand and maybe get to snowboarding someday, or maybe not. But also it's
just
like,
wear our jacket and do psychedelics.
I've never done that.
We bring our brands together.
I've definitely never done that. So, okay. So purpose-driven, is that where we are going around there?
I think it's so interesting, because it's beautiful what you were just describing. That a lot of times that's why people have come to us to start to support work in trauma, was because of this kind of feeling at one, right? And there's a way that psychedelics goes into this. Like, psychedelics help with environmentalism. People that have psilocybin experiences tend to then also connect more with the world and connect more with an environmental movement. So there's something just so much bigger. Like, I have this piece where I'm working on this medicalization piece and trying to do it in a really thoughtful way, which is part of why we did this as a public benefit corporation, was to have these tenets that as we did it, we would, stick to access, like, who's our patient, how are we thinking about it? But there's also this other piece that we're part of MAPS to this bigger movement.
It should be part of your branding.
Right, that's part of, so I have to think about not even just the patient, and am I doing it for this, like when I'm here, but I'm also, like, I'm on the MAPS nonprofit board. And so there's this whole bigger, like, can we get to zero net trauma? And can we have, like, psychedelics? Can they be part of this? Can they be part of re-spiritualizing people? Can we create bigger access? And so there's this big brand that we sit underneath that I'm always trying to think about, that this is just my piece of it, and I'm going to focus over here, but there's so much more that has to happen. And the decisions I make should not make that job harder. Right. So the decisions I make about getting this in the medical system, and when we work in a political way, should also support drug law reform. Right. And most pharma companies won't touch these kinds of things. So I'm always trying to navigate these interesting places that feel really gray to a lot of people. And usually that's not where pharma works. It's like they like black and white, kind of decision making. And so we work in a lot of gray areas. So creating ourselves as a public benefit corporation and impact driven helps us to, like, stay strong in this, especially as we start to take in money, where we can say, listen, we're always going to include our stakeholder in our decision making, and that impact has to be balanced with profit. And so the both have to be considered. And so we've set these things up for ourselves where it's access, safety and quality, it's equity, just all these things that you traditionally you would be looking at. Does this drive my bottom line? But we're going to say, does it drive impact as well as make us sustainable?
Yeah, and I think we've been chatting, and it's been really fun to get to know each other over the preparation period for this. And one of the things that we did early on when Donna deputized me to get the program going is we had to figure out what things meant. But I also am a strong believer in a process called materiality studies, and it comes from the accounting world. but it's actually can be much more progressive than that as it sounds. And it's basically the idea of creating a pretty exhaustive list of all of the ways you can be impacted by other factors, but also of how you impact the world. And then you really start to go out to stakeholders and really understand how your business is impacting them, and what are their most important areas of concern. And I learned a lot in some of the sessions yesterday on just using better language on that, which I think was really special on the bridge building sections. But I think, so you take that and then you look at business impact, and you can start to map out your priority areas of where should you focus based on your stakeholder priorities. And this is something that B Lab and B Corp are actually bringing into their standards even more. I think the 2024 standards, for example, require you on an annual basis to be touching base with your your communities that you identify 3 communities that have historically been marginalized, your priority communities, and you have to be touching base with them on at minimum an annual basis to be ensuring you're dealing with the impacts on those stakeholder groups. And so
we should mention we are a B corporation as well as a benefit corporation.
Yeah, and so you map it out. It's a materiality matrix, but that's how you prioritize what your areas are of where you're going to focus, because the challenge for us in 2012 when we built the program, we could have done anything. It could be, and if you try to do everything, you're not going to do anything well. And so it really helped us focus in. In our early days, as you start to do that, you're doing, sustainability or impact 101 or 1.0, which is basically trying to minimize your impact. And then you're moving towards this, okay, now how do we neutralize our impact? How do we move towards a positive impact? And then you get to this like regenerative phase, systemic change. And we're, maybe in the middle of that evolution, I think now. But this is this interesting tension. And so we were talking about, I'm like, oh, you got to do this materiality study. Let me help you out and figure it out. Because you have to start to prioritize these. And once you do that, you have to set goals. You got to set really clear things that you are saying you're going to achieve, and then transparently transparently saying, did we get there or not? And you have to publicly do that. And I think you have an interesting tension because you're needing to get funding, and people want to minimize what you commit to for impact because you're getting traditional investors. Hopefully you don't have to get too many traditional investors. So if anyone has any money, let us know.
Non-traditional investors, yeah.
We'll funnel it this way. But anyway, and so I think that's the balance. And then you have this MAPS community and this Psychedelics community that are like, you've got to do more.
Yeah.
And how do you figure that out? Like, do you use that phase of one point, okay, let's minimize our impact, but while knowing you want to be creating regenerative systems change. And it's like, maybe once you get the money, you can, okay, we signed them up. Now it's like, and now we're actually changing things. But
the financial piece is difficult because even though Burton has one shareholder, me, we're privately held. So I have no investors. I have no other stakeholders other than my employees but we have a profit sharing plan, right? And so we always say we're measuring, I've always said even before we started this work, that we really measured ourselves on, you've got to be profitable to keep growing and keep going. But we always measured ourselves also on the strength of the brand and the strength of the community. But we're not rewarding people based on that. We're working on it now. Like, how do we sort of say, okay, we're going to reward you on impact, right? No, we're rewarding them. It's a profit sharing plan, just like your investors want an ROI.
Right.
So how do you convince?
How do you incentivize?
How do you incentivize, and how do you convince them? Hey, maybe you didn't get the ROI you wanted, but we hit these targets. Yes. It's tricky.
It's tricky.
And it's something we're kind of struggling with. Yeah,
we've got a solution for that.
I know she does. She does. But for a long time, we're telling the employees that we're measuring our success in different ways, but we're paying their bonus based on our profitability.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we struggle with this too.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned today from Ali, which I thought was so great, like, we've been working on these tenets of public benefit, and then how will we measure them, and then having a scorecard. We've had to make our own because we couldn't become a certified B Corp because we're a psychedelic company and they don't take us. And so,
If anyone's in the audience from
anybody
B-Lab.
out there? Anyway, so we are making our own, and we're a benefit corporation, a Delaware benefit corp, and we need to report back to our right now single shareholder, which is a nonprofit. So how do we do this? And Ali was showing me you should do this materiality assessment. And then when we kind of looked at ours, she pulled up the one for Novartis, which is like, like think of big pharma, you're probably going to think of Novartis at some point. And it doesn't look very different, right? And in some ways, when we have people we're talking to that are financing us, that's good, right? But then when you're talking to your other stakeholders, you're like, that's not good. So it's almost like we brought it up to too high of a level when you do that. And like you've lost what makes you special. And so it really is important that we then have these ways of measuring and we get really clear on them. Like, how do we know that we're hitting our tenets of impact and not kind of greenwashing, by having this? So we'll figure it out.
I know, I was poking her. I'm like, yours doesn't look that different than Novartis. Come on, let's do this. They have access at the top in their top corner.
Yeah. We have to get in there more, and figure out really what differentiates us.
But it's a balance, and you have to figure that out over time. So I think it would be nice to open it up to questions now, does anyone have any final thoughts that the impromptu moderator didn't cover? I think I think you talked a little bit about access, but I do think that is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And my wife does gender affirming care for UVM and kind of teaches a lot of the residency on how to do that care. And I know I was looking at numbers for trans folks, and I think it was 3 to 10x the times, with taking away people that had previous life trauma, just the discrimination faced, are 3 to 10 times more likely to have PTSD. Yeah. And so I think, I don't know if you have a little bit more to go into there, but I think that's probably one of the most important things you can do. And I think there's also so many complexities to this, because as you were talking about it, training is 100-hour training, which when I was talking to my wife, who's a family medicine doctor, she's like, 100 hours? Like, that is so hard to find time to do 100 hours. And how are you going to do this? And then you got to get into environments where you have a prescriber and a therapist, which isn't that common. And so that's a whole nother barrier. Because we were trying to figure out how we would make this happen last night while going to sleep.
And it's a scheduled drug.
In Burlington.
And it's a scheduled drug, which is going to have a REMS, which is, and it has to be given in an office with a therapist. So many things that make a barrier to entry. But I think this is where we start to differentiate ourselves a little more than like what Novartis's little thing looks
they
like.
say access, but your access
is like, but when we think of access, we're like thinking of this, like if you're non-binary or BIPOC, like I said, you are more likely to have trauma that needs to be treated, but it's more likely to be untreated. And so trying to make sure that we're prioritizing clinics and training providers that will treat an underserved population and treat them the way that they want to be treated, right? And also be able to measure this. So this is like one of our tenets when we start to drop down into like, what do we mean by access? It isn't just getting out there to males and females. Like even the fact that we have more women than men in our clinical trials, and we have a very diverse population is much more than what a lot of clinical trials do, but we had to carry that forward. And then we got to measure it and then make sure that the people that are getting treated, one of our other tenets is, is it efficacious? Do they feel safe, and are they getting a response? Racial trauma is a tricky one because usually in a clinical trial for this, you require the person to no longer be in the traumatic situation to get treated. I don't think I have to explain that further, right? Yeah. It's like, so it's, trying to, there's so many barriers for this. And the fact that we're trying to do this where we are, like you said, putting a prescriber with a therapist. They're not always working together. A lot of times it's in psychiatry, it's medication management, and you're not working with a therapist. So putting these two things together. And this doesn't exist. This is a brand new ecosystem. We're the first people to go into this. So we're going to make so many mistakes along the way, I'm sure. But for us, there's something that Taylor said yesterday, Taylor Paul, that said, I'll meet you at the finish line. I don't care who crosses first. And that has been one of the ways that we've worked in the past, and it's hopefully something we can still keep doing even as we become, even as we take in investors, is that we've been trying to push this forward and say, we don't even call our competitors, we call them our colleagues, right? Like if you get this there first, great, do it, because it just needs to be available.
Let's stop it there with that line. That was great. So question time. We have mics. Don't talk until the mic gets in your hand so that our people in the comfort of their couch at home can hear you.
I don't have a question. I just want to say you're a fucking goddess. Like what you are doing is amazing. And I love that you are looking at this from a much broader lens and that you see us here. And I really appreciate that. And I really hope, I know you're going to get to the finish line.
Thank you.
So.
Hello, over here. Your left.
We're looking at the
Ali, what's your solution for the impact problem? How do you measure impact and then distribute based on that?
What's the impact problem?
Well, Donna was saying, we distribute right now. We reward people based on profit, but how do we reward people based on impact? And you said I got an idea, and then we moved on to something.
No, we are actually working on something we're calling a balanced scorecard.
Yeah. So it was actually it's been a fun process. Part of that, the history with it is we went to Donna's house, I remember, and I built a little interview thing to do, obviously informally, but we were trying to figure out how to move from kind of a founder-driven company to, to institutionalize things so that you didn't have to depend on a singular
Yeah,
person
institutionalizing Jake's role and my role.
And so she talked about what she had mentioned before in community, and I was like, well, I have this idea. I've been wanting to do this for a while anyway. It's how do we bring in this balanced scorecard concept? So it's somewhat of a traditional business concept, but the idea is you have your key areas that you're going after. And so we've identified, so you have financial performance, which as we mentioned, we had profit sharing. That's what we are rewarding. And then we now have a way to look at the holistic health of the business. So we have consumers and brand. So is our brand healthy? Are our employees and culture healthy? And then our purpose, all of our purpose commitments. So we have 2025 and 2030 goals. So we're committed to being carbon positive by 2025 and hitting science-based targets by 2023 with emissions reductions, for example. So we are charting our progress towards those goals in the purpose section. That's just one example. And so we're working right now on that system. So we have that all identified, and we're working on setting the correct metrics so that we can know in all of those areas. And then we're slowly rolling that out, both into like cascading that through the organization so that everybody, so the senior executive team, we're responsible for hitting that holistically, that whole scorecard success. But then there's accountability throughout the organization. So everyone knows as an individual, I'm accountable to doing this in order to hit our climate target, for example. And then over time, we're going to be able to start to shift that into how we reward employees financially. So are we hitting the holistic health of those 4 areas? And that will be how we do it versus did we hit our growth and profit targets?
Because, you want employees to say, you want people to say no to certain accounts, for example, that's going to hurt the brand, right? So how do you institutionalize that where they're making decisions not to sell the dicks or whatever? Sorry. Yeah. Oh, Dick's Sporting Good or Dick's. I think it could be either.
Yes.
I think both works.
They really like our gloves.
But you don't want them to just sell. You're going to hurt the brand in the long run. So, yeah. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Wait for the mic.
So just to be clear, does that mean that if you had a bumper year on the profit, but you didn't hit any of those other climate targets or brand targets or the other rewards would be, let's say, lower, relatively
Yes.
lower for your employees?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks. Cool.
So it's clear that like all three of you on stage have had to push for change and innovation when it maybe wasn't straightforward or easy, and people would push back on that. And I'm sure that's required a lot of both confidence in your mission, but also openness to feedback. And I feel like sometimes I personally struggle to balance those, like confidence that we are on the right path, that we just need to execute, but also openness to feedback from people that maybe know things that you don't. And I was wondering if you could just maybe speak to like how you find that balance and how maybe that's evolved over time in your organizations.
I don't know if you want to.
If you have a thought, go for it. And I'll think about this for a minute.
Like,
I
well,
take
none
a
of us
lot
are open to feedback, so no, I'm just kidding.
What feedback?
Yeah.
I realized early on we needed a board of advisors, that we really needed some people, especially entrepreneurs whose companies were bigger than ours. So I think it's a matter of finding those trusted advisors that are going to be really honest with you. I also do, what I really do is rather than taking feedback from a senior manager, I will go down and really talk to people who are on the ground. I remember when we were having problems in Japan, I didn't even bother talking to the GM, right? I went in and interviewed all the employees, So I think really having your ear to the ground and not just taking what your senior people are telling you, even though they're usually right now, really kind of going both above, like advisors that have more experience than you do, and then down on the ground is my advice.
And I have one personal value that's really strong for me is to always be open to a better idea. Maybe that's part of my serial solutions provider, but it's like, I love when people ask a great question or have a better way of doing things. I'm like, okay, yes, let's go in that direction. I think that's really important for politicians, for everyone. But I also learned a lot from that Bridge Builders section. It was funny, I wrote down one of those things, but one of the biggest challenges that I have is my groups are changing the company in every way. So strategy is trying to change that. Like all we do is try to push the company forward, and people get really tired of that. And so I get really tired at night because like you feel like you're always in, not a battle, but you're always pushing people in directions they don't want to go, and they're maybe not as open to change. And so one of the things I took down from yesterday for Monica was just the like idea of reframing questions. So not why do you disagree with this thing that is so freaking obvious and we need to do, but and like feeling like they're against you, but also like just reframing questions of what concerns you about this, and like ensuring people feel heard and that you're connecting with people on a personal level and bridging that divide, because we are experiencing a divide. Ashley knows this, like running our purpose and impact, we're trying to shift our company into a focus on equity and all of these things. There are a lot of hard conversations to have, and they're really tiring. And I think part of that is figuring out, like I learned a lot, it was very opening for me to think of these new ways of just reframing questions that could actually help us come together. So I think that's something that's I'm personally working on. And I think yesterday was really helpful for some of those techniques.
I would say I get a lot of feedback from various places, and it can create a lot of spin. And I am naturally someone that likes to collaborate and build alliance and like team player and all this. And that doesn't always work when you're the leader of a company that needs some decisions. And so like really learning how to balance, like I think communication is key. And I think that going up and down, and you have to really trust the people that are giving you the feedback, right? I think this is important, is to like have those trusted advisors and have hard conversations. But that you also have to trust your intuition, because I've gotten myself into a place of like, with really hard decisions that feel like they're going to change directions of things, of like wanting too much to build and bring everybody along, and that creates chaos when you do that. So it's a balance, I think. Being open is number one, right? Being open to the feedback and ideas, finding the trusted people that you can bounce these things off of, having a variety of them too. Like I have multiple kind of coaches I work with from various backgrounds, so I think of myself as like a cauldron where I'm taking in a lot of hard things. I'm taking in input, I'm taking in feedback, I'm taking in things from stakeholders, and my job is to like try to look at it all together and use my intuition too to like figure out how to like move forward. And maybe something beautiful kind of comes out of this cauldron.
Thanks. I also just want to applaud you. I think hearing you talk about the broken system and really starting to understand the inequities in the system is just like a refreshing thing to hear from someone in your role and who works inside of a biopharma company. So thanks for naming it. And I would also encourage you and push you to keep pushing on that, and understanding what your role is from a place of privilege to keep addressing those inequities. So want to applaud that and say that. And also, I had a question a little bit around your need to build credibility with what is really like two very different stakeholder groups, right? You're sort of saying folks from the nonprofit who understand, love psychedelics, love that experience, and then a really sort of like old school, traditional, institutional base that you need to get some funding from. And I feel like what a lot of consumer-facing brands do a lot of the time is build partnerships to build credibility in either of those two places. And I Donna has lots of examples of that from Burton for sure. But I'm curious, when you think about working in partnership with other organizations or working in partnership with other companies, have you thought about folks that could help you build some credibility in either of those two really polarized stakeholder groups?
Yeah, I think our connection to our nonprofit parent is really important, partly for this. And then as we go forward into a medical system, like picking who like our first wave of clinics is going to be, and who's going to do the treating, and making sure they've done their work, right? Like so one of the things we do is think about who we're partnering with to bring this forward and who's going to be treatment providers. And then also in training, who else are we partnering with to do training, and making sure, training of therapists, making sure that we're picking a variety, and that we're also looking at what are their mission, vision, and values, right? And then even with investors, like, unfortunately, this is not a great time to be picky about where your money comes from. In the environment that we're in right now, with it's not a great time to raise money. But we're, that's part of us having like our impact tenets too. Is like, because that's another partner, is your financial partner, and trying to make sure that we understand our values and they understand our values when we pick to work with them. So definitely, it's a really important part of this, that. Part of the decisions that we make. Yeah. Still a lot of work to do there.
Looks like we have two more.
Hello? Okay, good. I have a question in regards to, it's me over here. I'm hiding by the table. In regards to psychedelics, I'm somewhat unfamiliar. I'm actually completely unfamiliar. Let me just be transparent. It sounded good when I said it, but so I'm unfamiliar with it, but mental health is like really important to me. My mother's bipolar and manic depressive, and she's been in a mental institution since I was 13. And so I'm always thinking of ways to try to get her some more holistic health options. She's in Indiana, but my intention is to move her out to Colorado in the next few years. So I wanted to learn more about what is psychedelics in reference to pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Right now we're only been in the clinical trial stage, right? And we can only work in the indication that we do a study in, which is PTSD. But one of the things that we tried to do was really make that broad. So a lot of times when you do studies in a certain group, so people with PTSD, you make the inclusion criteria really narrow. And we tried to do the opposite and make it pretty broad. But what your mom has with bipolar, that is a group we haven't studied. But there's what I hope for with what we're doing, and I already see it happening, is that we're opening the door for people to start thinking about new ways of treating mental health. And I see that coming. There's like so many psychedelic companies out there now. Like there was more of them before. There's been a little bubble and bust already in this, but the ones that are sticking around, like they're looking at these difficult areas. And so yeah, there's not a lot of innovation, right? You've experienced this in your life. And then just one more thing that brings up that I want to say is that mental health affects not just the person, it affects their partners, their family, their community. So it's another thing that we're really thinking about is how do we try to treat more than the person, and how do we try to create an infrastructure that when that person's getting treated, they also have like aftercare from that, integration from it. And as they start to improve their symptoms, how do we help them work with their family or work to get another job or, work to integrate back into life? There's so much work to do in mental health. And I see people being inspired to innovate in treatments that are available. And I'm sorry that it's not there yet for your mom.
You are looking into testing some other things, correct?
Yeah, we're looking at other indications that would have trauma at their root. So eating disorders, substance use disorders. So really like somebody has a traumatic experience and someone ends up with this, with this diagnosis, and somebody ends up with this one, doesn't really matter to me. It's, it's how do you get to the root and treat the trauma and not the symptoms? And so anything that I see out there that we look at and we think that trauma is at the real root cause of that, that's something that we would look at going after and proving that this could be helpful in.
Firstly, just hey.
Firstly, just
incredible creative programming, bringing you on stage, absolutely amazing, and you're like clearly an incredible human being. So incredibly grateful that you're leading the charge in doing such vital work as someone who's sort of had unlocking and healing of trauma through sort of recreational use of psychedelic drugs. But my question is about profit, and big pharma is an incredibly profitable sector, and I question why this cannot be incredibly profitable, and profit impact is baked in to your parent company and your mission. Why can't sort of profit be the driver and sort of there not be a fear of it being an incredibly profitable business?
I think it will be incredibly profitable. And I think it's important that as we look at that and as we make it the decisions, like it will not be difficult, I don't believe, to make a profit and hold impact at the same time. And so to not always try to maximize the profit because it's going to be there, it might take us a while to get there. And the reason, though, a lot of times things are really profitable in the medical system and in pharma is because the prices are very high and there's also patents, right? So in the past, we've had an anti-patent strategy. We have to rethink that. We still would want to do this in a way that's super conscientious. It's very expensive to do this work too, right? And we've done it cheaper than most, but we've still spent $150 million to get to right here, and we still have to spend another $150 million to get this over. And so trying to balance all of these pieces, but getting people that invest in pharma to look at us and say, they don't like to take the risk. Like, even though we can show and we have models and we know that there's such an incredible need out there, and even without setting our prices super high and trying to like keep them in line with impact, that we can make a large revenue. Like, we know that. But we have to convince, I guess, convince other people that that's true, because they see risk. they're like, I don't know, this hasn't been done before. It's a drug plus a treatment. You got to train therapists. You don't have patents. I don't know. There's a lot of fear out there too when you try to do something new. People like to make the sure bet a lot of times.
Well, and it's just making me think about how important it is to find the right shareholder. You need investors, and you have to find the right ones too, and you got to set your benefit standards and principles really strong, because once people are shareholders, they're going to be voting on those with the ability to impact things, even though it's not just the fiduciary duty to profit. So it's just a really interesting challenge that you're up for, because you've got to get the money, but you also need to get people that believe in the benefit.
And that they can see what you're saying. Like it should be a no-brainer out there, right? That this is, you can serve two purposes. You can serve need, and you can still become sustainable and make a profit. These two things can exist together.
Okay, I think
we're over.
I think we are over by 10 minutes, and everyone wants to go outside, so.